Good morning, everyone. Apology for a minute delay. We have a great team of engineer joining us today. Today we're going to take a little bit different approach, but again, everyone have a chance to just ask question. We are going to open the live question as well. Jake and Whitestone team will provide a quick update of what's going on as of today from the city, county, all this compliance and the rebuilding effort that we've been doing. Again, from us, this collaboration from all the professional, our mission is really to share this information that you have extended arms and leg. And if you are still in the process of planning when to start, what to build, please come join us. We have a team of great insight that will share their insight and exactly where to go from here. That's what we want to be here for, and to make sure we can rebuild our community as fast as we could. Hopefully it's faster than all of us are hopeful. So with that, I'm just gonna turn over to Jake. We have a lot to go over today. With that, Jake.
Yeah, sure. Thank you so much, Suprani, and thank you for helping us to host this. My name is Jake Malott. I run a company called Whitestone. We do land use consulting and permit expediting in the county of LA, as well as its surrounding jurisdictions, city of Los Angeles, Santa Monica, WeHo, Beverly Hills, Pasadena, Malibu, all that good stuff. So we've been hosting this series now for a 1 month, a month and a half. And this month's series, we are bringing in some experts to discuss some common problems that come up, offering up their expertise to people in the audience to ask questions as they see fit. I can run through some of the updates that we've been seeing from our end as we've been talking to the city. And then we can sort of open up a dialogue. We've got a few great qualified individuals from the engineering trades today. We've got Garrett Mills, principal of TNS Structural. And we've got as well Christopher Allen, who's vice president and managing principal at Earth Systems. And then we've got Rasur Bongalan, who is with land survey building design at RB Engineering. He also does civil and some structural forensics as well, which is very important right now. Let me see if I can, let's see, kind of do a quick gloss over of where we're at as far as, I'll just present sort of the typical presentation and that way we at least have some kind of a backdrop or something here. Let's see if I do present. Let's see. Share. There we go. All right, so this is our Building After the Fire series, Whitestone Rebuild series. My name is Jake Malott. Got some great experts here, as we just mentioned. Real quick, I just talked about our company, what we do. We essentially help people with the bureaucracy of various jurisdictions. So helping you guys get approved. We work with architects, builders, developers, etc. There's been a couple of updates coming out of the state. Things have started to slow down on the executive orders side, but I can cover what I've learned this last week. Here's the executive orders we've seen so far, largely addressing things like a reduction in coastal commission access to projects. I did meet with the Department of Planning in the city of Los Angeles, at least, about 2 days ago. And what I'm hearing as of now is that for rebuild projects, coastal commission is not going to be assigned as a clearance, or the planning department is not going to be assigned as a clearance. I'm hearing that projects which burn to the ground, which are deciding to do more than 110% rebuild, are still going to be allowed to file an accessory dwelling unit application under a categorical exclusion. So normally that would be a coastal development permit, but the executive order in 2025 clarifies that accessory dwelling units ought to be allowed under the categorical exclusion zone. So that is a pretty big one. I've heard as well a little bit of hot gossip that the Coastal Commission is really quite upset that they have had their hands tied behind them. So if you are advising clients, or if you have a project that is not going to be within the 110% rebuild, expect that Coastal Commission is not going to be giving you any breaks. So things like caissons, if you're going to be doing that pool in the backyard, if you're going to be doing an accessory living quarters, things that would fall under a categorical exemption, CEX, or caissons, and then a accessory dwelling unit normally would fall under a coastal development permit. You probably want to take care of your CADX if you're in the Palisades, which would be single family home with basement, attached garage, and then being able to do that ADU. You'd want to do that scope of work and then get a C of O issued, and then open up an application for any kind of ancillary new work. If you're doing a new pool, if you're doing something else that would fall under a CEX. And the reason for that is because it could have those two paths end up slowing the other one down. So it doesn't look like the Coastal Commission is going to be allowing for phased out work. Mayor's Executive Order number 1 came out from the City of Los Angeles. This is still the first order. And if you've been on any of our other meetings and our other calls, we've been through this kind of this one over each week. Essentially, it waives things like discretionary process down to ministerial. That applies to haul routes. That applies to any kind of overlays. That applies to coastal. That applies to just about everything. Those are getting dropped down to ministerial only. There's the 30-day review period. So when you do submit, they have to issue comments within 30 days. Agency clearances, sub-agency clearances are supposed to issue their review within 5 days. There's a major hurdle right now in the City of Los Angeles, and I'm sure in the county too. I'd have to clarify this exact conversation with them. But that the mayor's order mentions that projects that were burned to the ground may add 10% to the existing floor area. The challenge in City of LA is that there are 4 definitions of floor area. There's building code floor area definition, there's zoning code floor area definition, there's school fee floor area definition, and then you have residential floor area as a definition. And so what building and safety is essentially saying is, if you submit, we really don't know which of those definitions to apply your 10% to. What does this mean for people? Well, just to let anybody know, if you're wondering whether you're behind or whether you're ahead, in City of LA, at least, I was told that less than 10 applications have actually been submitted at this point in time. I've talked in many of our discussions and meetings about, let's see if I can find, about timeline philosophies. Is it better to submit now, or is it better to wait? Right now, there's a gray area in these determinations. So right now, if you submit, you can take advantage of that. We are going to submit a house, for example, here in the next week or so, and we're going to try to take advantage of this gray area around floor area definition. So we're actually going to be submitting under the assumption that floor area may as well mean school fee area, which is the largest. It's measured from the outside walls. It includes a lot of non-habitable type of space. And so we're going to submit on that, hoping we can pick up an additional few hundred square feet on our 10%. Now, for those of you who are a little more unsure, you don't feel comfortable with the risk, then you would wait. You would wait until a second determination, a second mayor's order comes out in the City of LA. If you're in Malibu, they're still working. They should have changes codified by, I would say, April. It's advised not to submit until Malibu has codified their changes. If you're in Altadena, Altadena has the 2023 disaster ordinance, and they're going to be modeling off of this. We have not heard or seen of any changes since we've heard about that. And then Pasadena has, I think, 300 affected properties. They are just going to be taking things in on the disaster, similar to the disaster ordinance. They've not really released anything specific yet. Let's open it up to some of our panelists today. And these guys have a lot of great expertise and have been dealing with a lot of questions to building and safety and planning and from the general public. So maybe you guys, let's start off with, I'd say, how about I don't know. How about Christopher? Maybe you want to start us off. Tell us what you've been seeing in your experience and what maybe some major issues or points of confusion that have been coming up and how you're advising people and just introduce what your expertise is and then go from there.
All right. Well, good morning, everybody. I'm Chris Allen with Earth Systems. I'm an engineering geologist. We provide geotechnical engineering services for Greater LA. It's somewhat of a difficult question you pose because it has, as you've noticed, each jurisdiction is different. I'll start with Altadena. That's LA County. They, as you mentioned, have not provided any direct guidance, but we're kind of going off of past experience with fire rebuilds. And so with Altadena, they're not clear as to whether, I mean, with respect to what I do, they're not clear as to whether a geotechnical or soils report is going to be required. So yeah, that's unclear. However, we are preparing quite a few investigations in support of projects that are trying to get in line and working with the structural engineer to provide some value. Moving down to Pasadena, we haven't heard anything as well. And then Pacific Palisades, City of LA's typically provides the most clear guidance. And what I'd suggest is with respect to what we do, that you can go down to the grading department and request a grading pre-inspection. They call it a GPI. And in that process, you can just provide a simple sketch as to what you propose to do, and they'll have an inspector come out and they fill out a checklist and tell you exactly what you need. And that'll at least provide some guidance as to what's required, particularly for geotechnical. And moving to Malibu, you can expect a geotechnical report to be required. They're not allowing us to do any exploration until you've completed the phase 2 debris cleanup. But if you're in Malibu and you want to get started, you could definitely get a geotechnical consultant on board, and they can start with some of the desktop studies. And once the debris clearance has been completed, then they can complete the exploration. It pretty much so sums up what I'm aware of right now.
Awesome. Thank you, Christopher. And then we can jump to how about Garrett? You're working in structural. Common question that comes up, Garrett, in regards to projects is, do I have to keep my foundation? Should I opt to have it removed? And maybe you can comment on that, and as well as any sort of common questions that you've been encountering.
Sure thing. Yeah, I'll give you a little more background about myself. So Garrett Mills, I'm a principal at TNS Structural. Our firm is based out of Pasadena. We actually have multiple offices around the state, and our headquarters in San Luis Obispo. But we have, because of our multiple offices across the state, we've actually responded to the last 3 or 4 major wildfires in the state. So we did quite a bit of reconstruction in Santa Rosa after the Tubbs fire. We did some reconstruction in Ventura after the Thomas fire in 2017, and we did some reconstruction in Malibu after the Woolsey fire. So we're pretty well versed in the process. The biggest question I'm getting right now is about existing foundations. I serve as the president of the Structural Engineers Association of Southern California, and we knew that this question was coming from past wildfire experience from our Structural Engineers Association and at the state level. So we put together a guide to engineers and really directed to building officials on how to evaluate existing foundations after wildfires. At this point, when there's a lot of debris in the way, it ends up being a pretty low-tech process. We send some engineers out to properties with just sounding hammers, and we do some visual inspection of what we can see. We base that a lot on the color of the concrete. The more pink it is, the worse off it is. The more it looks like the dull gray color of normal concrete, the better it is. When you hit it with a hammer, if it has its existing strength, you get a nice pinging sound. If it sounds like you're hitting a book, it's pretty weak. And so that's really guiding us on how we talk to our clients about that decision. Obviously, we can't service 12,000 structures all at once, but we are serving people on individual basis, sending engineers out quite often. So the guidance that's coming from Structural Engineers Association is generally about the rules of rebuilding under current building codes. So if you saw in the City of LA's executive order or in their policy, what they've basically said is that if the building was built under the 2019 CBC, you could pretty much just resubmit those same plans and rebuild that same project without having to do a code upgrade. For foundations, what that actually means in terms of the timeline of when that was constructed, we would have been designing projects to the 2019 CBC starting in about 2020. So certainly projects that were built within the last 5 years, you could resubmit those same plans. You have a much better chance of saving most of your foundations, I would say. We're using a strategy on foundations where even if the damage that we see is at the top, which most of it is, or we're talking a lot of raised floor construction, where really the damage is where the wood was against the concrete. So that would be the ledgers or the sill plates of the wood. Everything that's buried underground is probably in pretty good shape. So we're using a strategy on quite a few potential projects where we're planning on cutting off the top 16 inches or so of the existing concrete, leaving everything below that, epoxying in, using new anchors set in fresh concrete and repouring that upper 16 inches. That's really a cost savings measure to rebuild, and foundations can make up a pretty large portion of construction cost, especially the grading and excavation, not just the materials, not just the rebar and concrete, but just the whole process of regrading a site, recompacting, digging new trenches. So if you think your property has a pretty good shot at reusing existing foundations, I absolutely would advise you to try to go that route. It should save quite a bit of cost. Now, the 2019 CBC has, I would say for foundations, from a structural standpoint, the city and county of LA have pretty much adopted, it's pretty much been the same requirements for probably more like 20 years. So I would say probably more like the 94 UBC or the 97 UBC, 1997, right? So if your project was built within the last, say, 25 years, you have a much better shot. And that's because the requirements for foundations have not changed that much. If we're designing for expansive soil, we generally design 24-inch deep foundations, strip footings around the perimeter of the property. We pretty much put 2 rebar in the bottom of that concrete pour and 2 rebar at the top of that concrete pour. And we can, if we're doing an exploration and we cut through a slice of your foundation that was built from, say, the year 1995 and forward, you probably are going to find something similar to that. And that gives us a lot better of a starting point to work with. Now, if you're older than that, you have less of a chance to find that when you cut through your slice of foundation. So certainly if we go back to the 1950s, let's say, when, you know, a lot of Altadena at least was built 1950s and prior, Pasadena probably slightly older, Palisades probably a little slightly newer, actually. Like a lot of those houses have just been remodeled and so many times and reconstructed so many times since the 50s. But and then Malibu's about the actually like probably about the same as Palisades in just how many times it's been rebuilt. With the exception that it's so much harder to build in Malibu because of the new requirements that you're more apt to actually like leave foundations alone if you're trying to remodel. So that's a little long-winded, but basically if you're, you know, I'm giving you about a 40-year gray zone there between the 1950s and the 1990s. And that's because there's more unknowns for us as to what to advise. So that's where you might want to get us out there or get a structural engineer out there to actually do some sounding and some testing to just give you a little bit more information. But if you're built in the 50s, you probably don't have two rebar top and bottom in your footing. That is the requirement of current building code. So you'd be much less likely to be able to reuse those existing foundations. That's not to say that you couldn't reuse something that has good solid concrete. It just means that we would have to do more retrofitting of that foundation to reuse it. And then you're kind of weighing the cost of it is every general contractor will probably tell you it is much easier to rebuild off of a clear site than to try to work around something that's already there. So hopefully that gives you a little bit of guidance, and certainly I think my contact information is going to be shared, and I'm happy to take questions too. You're on mute, Jake.
Yeah.
Nope, there you go.
One common question, actually, I had an architect call me on the way to this meeting and ask me is, what is the city going to do about projects where it's an old non-compliant code and people are being told they have to bring it up to the code of today's standards, but does that also mean or imply that the entire site has to be brought to conformance? And this might be more of a civil engineering question, maybe for you, Reserve, which is, you know, if you're on a sloped site, for example, are you now all of a sudden cutting a 2-to-1 to bring your slope to that 2-to-1 standard? Do you have to make sure that any future structure has a caisson down to bedrock, whereas if it's an older property, maybe it was more sort of gently tucked into a slope, if you will? And so that's a major question that is coming up as well. I don't know who feels more confident to answer that. Christopher, that might be a question for you as well. I think everybody's on mute, FYI.
Yeah, you know, I'm sorry, I was having some issues with the audio. Could you please repeat that?
Yeah, so a common question is, so in many jurisdictions, when you're doing greater than a 50% remodel on a property, you have to bring the entire site into conformance. And oftentimes when there's a slope, you have to cut it at a 2-to-1, and any foundations need to be tied into bedrock on that slope and such. So what do you do for an old property that had some of these sort of slope conditions, or maybe just had conditions that today would require a pretty expensive engineered design? Do those people have to basically forecast for a heavy engineered entire property meeting today's codes, or does it look like they would be able to utilize like what was there existing? Because what I'm hearing, you know, from the building and safety side and the land use side is that all properties are going to have to meet today's code standards. the furthest back, as Garrett had mentioned, you could go would be the 2019 code.
Yeah.
So how do you guys respond to that?
Well, it's really going to depend on the jurisdiction. So for City of LA, you can expect to, and it's not clear, but typically in the City of LA, if you're going to exceed 110% of the original building, you could, I believe you're going to have to bring the entire site up to code. But yeah, there hasn't been clear guidance, but that would be consistent with what the city's been requiring. The kicker is that if they're going to require a geotechnical report, which if you have slopes that are in question, they will very likely require it. We have to identify any potential non-code complying slopes. And so what I'm not clear about is if we identify a non-code complying slope or condition, whether they have to mitigate that. We don't know that yet. However, if it's non-compliant to the point where it would pose a hazard, so if there's, for example, if we've got some potential for slope instability, and particularly after the fires, a debris flow issue, we would have to identify that and propose some sort of mitigation. So yeah, I don't have a clear answer for you on that. However, yeah, especially on hillsides, especially if they're burnt, you can expect some form of mitigation, if not just for superficial, but for maybe potential deep-seated stability issues. Now, when you get into Malibu, they offer some wiggle room, much more than City of LA. You can have a liquefaction issue or a slope stability issue or proximity to a fault zone, and they don't necessarily require you to evaluate that and design for that. However, you have to file an assumption of risk and release. It's called an ARR. And what it does, it kind of releases the city of any liability, so that you can build next to a fault, you can build next to a landslide, you can build in the liquefaction zone. However, it's dangerous to not at least do some form of evaluation, so that if you're in a liquefaction zone or a slope hazard zone, potentially landslide, we should identify that. The last thing we want you to do is rebuild and have some issue. So we're really taking it on a case-by-case basis. So yeah, difficult question to answer. As far as when you get into Altadena, especially on the gently sloping areas, you shouldn't have any problems unless you're increasing the property more than 110%. So both Altadena and City of LA, if you've got a flat area, you don't have slopes, you might come across a liquefaction issue. As long as you're not building more than 3 stories or subdividing a lot, you can waive some of the more exhaustive analyses for liquefaction. Hope I answered that question.
I can chime in too, Chris. We work together quite a bit, and we work on the structural side of these very complicated lots. So my advice would be, if you're in the city's probably going to make you get a geotechnical report anyway, but once you get that geotechnical report, my advice is absolutely have a conversation with your geotechnical engineer to understand not just whether or not the city is going to make you do site upgrades, but understand your own risk for your own site if you don't do upgrades. So right now in the City of LA, if you're on a sloping site, you have to do a slope stability analysis, and you have to prove that your slope is grossly stable to a factor of safety of 1.5. And that's just under the normal weight of the soil. You have to prove also that if an earthquake happened, that same mass of soil wouldn't mobilize, and you have to achieve a factor of safety greater than 1.0 or 1.1 or something like that. So I would say understand after you get that report, try to have that conversation with your geotechnical engineer, because even if you don't have to, if the city doesn't make you, and the reason they wouldn't make you is not because the city of LA Building and Safety Department, their perspective is they will want to make you upgrade the site. They want to make all these buildings safer than they were, and they want to make you follow the same rules that somebody building new construction would have to follow. It's better for community resilience. If we did have an earthquake, if we did have, a really rainy season, they don't want to see landslides and properties failing. So the only reason they would not make you is if they got another executive order that specifically addressed it, that would say, we want to be able to rebuild quicker, and so we're going to skip this step. I would say if you're caught in the middle of those two things, understand your own risk for your own property and what it would mean for you to rebuild something on shallow foundations on a site that really deserves to be built on deep foundations, and then make your own judgment if you're fit, if you're in this in between to where you're covered by an executive order, so you don't have to do it. Nobody's going to make you. That's a political will decision, right? That's the mayor's decision. That's the governor's decision, because politically they want to make sure that people see that there's progress in rebuilding. Building and Safety does not want that decision, right? Building and Safety wants community resilience and wants you to be safer and wants all these properties to be built to current code. So if you're caught in the middle, then try to have conversations with your engineers and your design team to understand your own risk for your own property.
I was just reading that it looks like we have some questions coming in on the Q&A. Looks like what if old night?
So the 50% rule also applies for civil. Let's say you were gonna do 50% rule, then you have to apply that to your stormwater management. I mean, I do that for just a standard rule. So the easiest reply would be yes.
And then in regards to civil, I guess, and you do surveying as well, right, Raser?
Yes, I do. Oh,
Yeah.
I should introduce myself.
Yeah, please.
I'm actually in Altadena. In my street, there are 36 homes. 4 is remaining. I'm one of them. On my street, I'm the only one walking my dog. Okay, so yeah, I do survey stuff. Should I cover a lot of the survey questions? I can. Okay. So I'm getting questions like, okay, here's a common one: retaining wall collapse. Who owns it? That's pretty common because now there's no support in any of these structures. So any tree issues? Okay, well, I want to remove the tree, but your neighbor doesn't want to remove that tree. Although even though there's a black, you can appeal that. There's a black painted on the tree to remove. Oh, I think it's blue. Okay, so that's a second issue. The third issue is probably, I get a lot of requests for this, is architects are wanting me to survey, let's say you have a structure that's non-compliant. Let's say they're 2-foot yard setback. And so currently, depending on your zoning, you're 7,500 square foot in Altadena, you need a 5-foot side yard setback. So now architects are saying, why don't you shoot the location of the foundation prior to removal by the Corps of Engineers, so that if we elect to use that side yard setback, we can. Now it goes to the safety issue, because I'm not going to go there. You got to clean that yard, because now it's a safety issue for me to be bringing my instruments and start shooting when I've got all this debris on site. That's the third one. And then obviously, I have several of these, a lot of, they have basement walls. You know, right off the bat, they asked me if this basement wall is good or not. And right off the bat, my instinct is say, nope, it's no good, get rid of it. Because I'm thinking, I mean, a lot of these homes over here are pre-94 Northridge earthquake. That's when they introduced the seismic load when you have a 6 foot or greater height on your walls. I mean, unless you're gonna go ahead and start doing core testing and GPR and all these dang walls, yeah, it'll be good. But I mean, the cost of you doing that, and plus, in my experience, since I had my license in 1987, I've not had one client come to me and actually build a new house on the exact same building footprint. Not one. So what are the chances of using the foundation again? Dump it. I mean, I'm saying that statement because it's like there's no way to go around it. You got, like Garrett said earlier, it's easier just to build off a clean slate.
Yeah, and I would add that in Altadena especially, most of the houses that we've seen that have had partial basements or California basements or even walkout basements, the waterproofing behind the walls was done. The houses were built before modern waterproofing, and so we've just seen a lot of deterioration over years of water infiltration. So if you had a house where you regularly went down into the basement and you saw that white powdery chalk on the walls, that's called efflorescence. That just indicates that you didn't have good waterproofing behind your wall. It's really unlikely that wall is going to be something you're going to be able to save. So unless the wall was built in the last 20 years, say, like we were saying, like the 94 UBC or the 97 UBC, I would assume that basement wall should come out.
All right, cool, Garrett.
And just to add on to that, yeah, we've worked on quite a few projects in the past, I guess, let's say like 5 or 10 years that have just, they were built recently. And yeah, they include basements and we have all the structural calculations, the geotechnical was done, city approvals, we have all of that information. So those we're rebuilding right on the old foundation, or that's the plan. But yeah, those are the only projects that we're actually rebuilding on the old foundation is, relatively recent buildings.
I also want to, I completely echo that. And we have plans from the last couple decades too, and we're, rebuilding those same footprints. But to Reeser's point, one of the things that I believe is clear from at least LA County is that if you had a non-conforming condition where you didn't meet you didn't meet the setback that would be required today. So a lot of the properties that were built in Altadena and Palisades would have maybe even a 0 line setback, especially to something like a garage or maybe a 2-foot setback. I believe it's been made clear that those can be rebuilt in the same location.
That is allowed, yes.
Yeah. So the real challenge that Reeser is bringing up, I think, is a very important one and might make your decision for whether or not you have that structure cleared, especially if it's like a detached garage and it isn't, if it's, the problem is you can't really survey that property. You can't really survey where those foundations are in the current state, right? Because there's too much debris on the site. There's large walls of stucco that are remaining. The wood burned out, the stucco's fallen over. So the question of how do you prove to the county or the city that your foundation or that your structure was only 2 feet from the property line, so that they don't make you move it to 5 feet from the property line when you rebuild. And so that gets into this question of, for the surveyor to do their work, can they do their work in the current state, or do they need you to clear that part of the site before they can get in there to do their survey work? And that might be something you need to consider when you do your debris removal, and whether or not maybe you leave just that foundation for that garage and you have to deal with it later, but it allows you then to build back the way you were. And it's just one of those things that you're going to have to navigate. And that's where you would talk to your surveyor specifically to figure out, is there a way to do this with the debris on site? Is there not? And do you have to clear your foundation, but leave maybe that piece of it, that detached structure that was a slab on grade, even knowing that it's going to cost you later to then have to do a private removal of just that piece. So all those are really complicated questions. They're definitely individual property questions.
Yeah, and that's I talked to, I think it was LA County, who had said if you don't have any good records of your parcel anywhere in the city, you could take a survey of your existing site where that foundation was, pair it with an assessor record, and then that would give them the two critical pieces of information they need to know, which is where was your footprint and how much square footage did you technically have. For those who say, well, I had an illegal addition, or I don't think we can find permit records of the, small accessory structure in the back, it's 80 years old or something like that. I would also say this would help you, because you can't have an argument if you don't have any record. If you have something, that's a lot better than nothing. And photos often don't really stand up in any sort of defensibility. So the best thing you can have is some kind of a drawing or plan that is stamped by a licensed professional. All of the gentlemen you see on this call are licensed professionals. So if you have go out there and take a survey and he puts his stamp on there that says this is where a footprint of a structure existed, that is better than any photo you could pull off of any website. So that would be your best bet. And then assessor records are free to access from the county. And in the end of this, we'll provide links to some stuff, but basically you just email helpdesk@assessor@lacounty.org or gov, and they'll send you your assessor records. So that would be some advice on how you can cope with not having a great permit inventory or a archival of any blueprints or anything like that.
And you should definitely start with trying to get whatever records the city or the county has already on your site. They may have an old plot plan, or they may have, scanned in. They have really, over the last 15 years, done quite a bit of scanning old records. So you may find that they have some indication that you had a structure 2 feet from that property line already on file. And that would definitely help to pair that with your assessor record. So you should do that search right now with the county or with the city. Request all your building records for your property.
Yep, and that is actually a service we're offering in our office to anybody interested. We're pulling all available permit record, archival blueprint. We'll pull all your assessor records. We'll scour for anything and everything through all the available paths we know. And then on top of that, we have Grant Title with First American Titles offering a discount on a certificate of guarantee, which will also provide us with hyperlinked documents to any easements that were listed, any sort of CC&Rs. So we're putting together a very comprehensive, we've got about 10 of those right now across the county that we're working on. So you can do it yourself for free. If you want to pay a professional to do it, we're happy to do it for you guys, obviously. Let's see if we got any questions here that maybe you gentlemen could answer. Let's see here. We've got Lisa says separate garage with a 1930s permitted guest house sharing an east wall, 3 sides of the garage built into 4 feet of earth. All structures 1930, but insurance says to keep the east-west walls, but not the north wall. We say remove all walls and rebuild. What would you suggest? Garage is on side property line. We have an old survey designating the location of this garage and guest house.
Come on,
Maybe
man. It's 1930. Let it go. Come
Well, I
on.
would say okay, so I think actually the question is pretty complicated because it sounds like they're dealing with multiple issues. So from a foundation reuse standpoint, you will not be able to reuse that 1930s foundation to support the new structure. However, that doesn't mean that you couldn't leave the foundation there and do a new foundation. Basically underpinning is something that we do pretty commonly, where we would support the new structure on new foundations that are integral with the existing foundations. And the reason that it sounds like you may be leaning towards doing that is to show that the foundation was there, because now you have a site setback issue. So these are questions where it's a pretty specific question that actually means that you should be talking to your plan specialist, architect, structural engineer. Use your professionals to help you answer this question, but there may be reason to keep something because it shows that it was there before, and that lets you rebuild in the same spot under the county rules. So, but Reese's right. From a foundation strength standpoint, the existing 1930s foundation is not adequate, and you would have to supplement or underpin or strengthen, or whatever the tools that we have in our toolbox for that structural piece.
Yeah, and I would just add from a siting perspective and a zoning perspective, you will be able to keep those non-conforming setbacks if that's what your insurance is trying to instruct you to do, is to leave some sort of the structure to basically grandfather or guarantee you those non-conforming setbacks. If you have a survey, a paper record is justifiable. You don't need to keep physical pieces of the existing structure in order to maintain that non-conformance. You just need to have a certified professional record of that.
I did see a couple questions come in about raised floor versus slab on grade.
Yep, looks like slab or raised. What would be insurance ramifications? Has this been explored? I guess maybe you guys could talk about slab or raised on maybe cost or complexity or engineering spec or standard. I know something we always get questions about in development is, how do I avoid a soils report? Can I design on shallow footings? Can I design on shallow footings if I'm in a special grading area or a liquefaction area? Or does special grading, liquefaction, or landslide automatically trigger a soils report?
And I don't believe it matters. Regardless of your foundation type or slab or floor type, either a soils report is required or it's not. But yeah, there was a question earlier regarding I think the benefits of one or the other, and I do think it's primarily it's preference. It's if you prefer a raised floor, you should go for a raised floor. You prefer slab on grade, go for a slab on grade. There's pros and cons. Obviously, my understanding is that the cost is about the same. Garrett might have some input on that, or Jake, you might as well. But
slab is probably a little bit cheaper to build new construction. Yeah. So and actually, like most of the track developments that happen, like if you picture the new, we keep kind of stretching out eastward. So if you look at Palm Springs and you look at all the planned developments that are happening out there, those are mostly done on slab on grade. And the reason that they're mostly done on slab grade is, one, that the earth is flat and you want to be able to walk straight into the house or straight out to the back patio without going up a step. So slab on grade is definitely less cost in that situation. If you have some kind of sloping site, you would, if you wanted to do a slab, what that means is that on the high part of the site, you're probably putting in a bit of a concrete wall there anyway to retain a little bit of soil and to lift your wood framing up off of exposed soil, so termite protection. And you're at the lower part of your site, you're probably, about even with the exterior grade to build a slab. So that's where, if you're on like a sloping site, you might look at doing a raised floor because you kind of need to build those walls anyway. In which case you might be stepping up a couple steps from grade up into the house or back out of the house to the patio. These are all really good questions for the architect, because it does come down to that preference, right? Do I want to step up into my site, or do I want to walk straight in? And then the other issue with slab on grade that we find is it's much more convenient to remodel a house in the future if it's on a raised floor, especially if you're doing something that's going to reroute like a sewer line. Otherwise, you're basically, to redo a sewer line that's in a slab on grade means you're going to demolish that concrete and dig a new trench through that slab to put a new sewer in. Gas, electric, water, hot and cold water, you can all run up through your attic generally. So that's a little bit less of an issue, but sometimes it's just so much more convenient to reconfigure something if you have room under the house. And if you had a slab on grade house, if you had a raised floor foundation already, if you ever had your house serviced, they probably sent somebody down into the crawl space to run new ductwork or run new plumbing line or gas line or cable or internet or whatever it was. Like it gives room under your house to do work. So that might be another consideration, is just what are you going to do in the future?
Do you find there are certain benefits to the raised foundation in regards to mitigation of, I don't know, moisture or other things maybe? Are there certain sort of like mitigation thoughts, I suppose, as a question, other than access to utilities and future installation of infrastructure components?
I think modern construction, slab on grade, there's requirements to do moisture protection. And if you're going to put in a new slab on grade, you would do that anyway. So you would do, a 10 mil or 15 mil thick, layer of basic plastic sheeting under your house. We call it a visqueen barrier. And you do that over a layer of gravel that's 4 inches thick or 6 inches thick. So that we call that a capillary break, so the water's not rising up through that gravel to get to the slab. So I think modern construction, we pretty much mitigate against moisture intrusion, but there is that extra risk. You have less risk of having water migrate up into the house from groundwater if you're raised above the earth.
Yeah, the only problem we've had with moisture issues with a raised floor is if you water excessively around your house and you turn on the HVAC and it takes the moisture out of the air and it just sucks everything up into the house.
Oh, wow.
I personally love my raised floor because you can go in there and play with the electrical and plumbing and cables, but it's definitely a personal preference. From a geotechnical perspective, if you go with the raised floor, you might be able to avoid removal and recompaction. So if you have shallow foundations or a slab on grade, if now the upper couple feet of the soil on your property is disturbed, you want to mitigate for that. So you'd have to have large equipment come in, remove that soil, recompact it, and that new compacted soil would support your shallow foundation and your slab. If you go with the raised floor, you could potentially avoid that by just deepening your foundation, which could often save some considerable money. But then you're going to have a garage that's going to have a slab on grade, which you're going to have to do some removal and recompaction. But you can deepen your footings and then compact just the shallow soil to support the slab. So
interesting. What's a depth difference? Just offhand, if I'm not doing a recompaction and I'm doing a raised foundation, what is the typical depth of the foundation going to be into that non-compacted soil?
Well, that would depend on site conditions. So
sure, of course. Yeah, let's say non-hillside versus hillside, maybe.
Yeah, I mean, let's just say like in Altadena or some flat area of Palisades, you have already compacted soil or firm native soil, or even, maybe even shallow bedrock. It just depends on the depth to that good material. So I'd say in Altadena, there's probably a good chance you could deepen your footing 4 feet deep. Sounds kind of deep for a foundation, but once you consider that you're going to have a crawl space and all that, there might be some cost savings to just deepening that foundation as opposed to going in and doing the removal and recompaction. But yeah, it's, as far as I'm concerned, it's your home. A lot of people really want us raised floors, and people really like slab on grade. So it's just do what you prefer.
Yeah. Yeah, your design professionals can design for either one. And we design raised floors where you walk in without a step. We do that fairly regularly too. So don't let that be like, don't misunderstand what I was saying earlier. I will say too, though, the way that your either U.S. Army Corps or a private contractor, when they remove debris, if they're removing foundations, they're not leaving your site compacted to a point where you can immediately start building a new house on that site. So you're going to have to do some kind of remedial grading, move a little dirt, recompact a little bit, at least. Even if you're going to build a new raised floor, you're probably going to have to move a little dirt around. And on some sites, it's going to be actually pretty significant, the prep that you're going to have to do after the old foundation was cleared to be able to build a new foundation.
Got it. I think that's great. It looks like we're actually hitting our 10 o'clock. Does anybody, any other questions from the audience? Gentlemen, thank you so much. This is incredibly informative. These are often, I think, questions that I'm asking the city with little to no response on. So thank you so much.
Happy to be a
appreciate it.
resource. Yeah, happy to be of help.
Well, it looks like, I know we're right on time. Really appreciate it. Just so you know, we also get a sense of this. People still feeling like we need some guidance step by step. And there's so many connection between engineer, land use, architectural, or maybe it's okay. We want to continue to be extended arms and leg for everybody here. If you lost your home, it's not going to be, you're not going to get all information in one setting. So we want to continue to provide this information. I will share the contact information from all of our speakers. Again, Jake and his team and all of us. If you don't know where to start, you can start with us or you can start with the city, county. But our speakers here, I think really, we appreciate. If I lost my home, I'm so confused listening to this. It's really overwhelming, but rest assured that I think our team has great suggestion, and I think that everyone here have the same mission. We want to make sure our community rebuilt as fast as we could. I know that we're not the one that determined the timeline here, but timeline, cost, and everything. So thank you, everyone. I don't see any other question. You see any question, Jay?
I think so. And I just want to clarify, we do have a recording of this, correct, this week?
We did.
Yeah, so we have a recording of this. We're going to we'll repost as we can.
We will.
Help you guys out, and we'll provide the contact of each of these gentlemen and their associated offices. And next week we'll be doing a builders series. So we're going to have West Side Builds. They're a design build firm out of the West Side, and they will be bringing some good information. And then our last meeting of this month and this month's series is going to include a gentleman from LA County Planning, and I think that's it for right now. Yeah,
Right now.
I'll see if I can get maybe somebody from City of LA or Malibu. But
Well, and to our panelists, please join us. There's a lot of questions come through my way. I usually send to Jake, or I try to get some answer. At Pace, we try to, again, just help everyone that with all this question. And we truly appreciate all of your expertise. You're the one that people ask, who should I start? Who should I talk to? I just say start with Whitestone, because they do pre-compliant construction, and before we know it, there's slab and cement and everything else, and the foundation. I want to be that person that we want to help connect the dot to all your designer, engineering, all the expertise here. And if anyone who attended here, you have any other question or still lost, we're here for you. You're not alone,
Mhm.
so. Thank you so
Absolutely.
much, everyone. I don't see other question.
Thank you.
All right, thanks,
Thank you so much, everyone. Thank you, Reser.
Edison was working on my street. I had to go turn on my Starlink.
I'm sorry. I know you dropped off. Like, what happened to it? But thank you. We appreciate
All right.
your land use survey professional as well. We were wrapping up. We will share everyone information, and I'm sorry. I mean, I'm glad that your house is okay in Altadena, and a lot of Altadena inquiry come through our channel as well that we don't know where to go. But now
That's
I do
me.
know where to go. We'll definitely share your contacts so people can
Thanks,
maybe
guys.
reach out. Thank you so
Sure.
much, everyone.
Thank you.